Music, it's definitely not only to make a career out of.
No.
Yeah, music can be something that is a lifelong passion, even if you're just doing it half an hour once a week or a couple times a week.
Yeah, absolutely. I look at music in a lot of different ways. Mm-hmm. Let me count the ways now. So one way is just as a way to exercise your cognitive ability. And I mean, the music has so many opportunities for brain exercise, memorization. You can set up musical problems that will confuse you and confound you to the point where it's like doing algebraic equations in your head, right? You can really work out your thinking muscles just using music as a model for questions and problems. So that's kind of a nerdy way to look at it. The music theory side of it, which is just, this is a very interesting intellectual pursuit. You know, there's that side of it, but then there's also two other sides of it that I think are really important. One of which is the fact that it's a personal thing. It's a personal experience that has a qualitative effect on your experience as a human being. So music can be experienced passively, actively through listening, or what I like to think of as super actively through creating. So if I love a song, I can sit down and take everything out of my consciousness except that song by putting on headphones and closing my eyes and living in that song for a minute. But in my experience, that doesn't even come close to comparing to the experience of learning that song and playing that song in a room, playing the song, whether it be piano, guitar, whatever. So another big side of it is just self-expression and musical experience being augmented by your ability to manifest it yourself. That's a huge one. And that's something I didn't even really think about till much later in my life, when I realized, like, I want to listen to Rocket Man right now. No, I'd rather play Rocket Man right now. You know? That's going to be a better time for me if I play it than listen to it. That's a big one. And then the other one, which I think for a lot of people, I think is the most important thing. For me, it hasn't been as much, just because the first two things I mentioned, just the personal, like, artistic, emotional side of it and the intellectual pursuit are really important to me. That's what I really like about music. But another really important one, obviously, is communication. Like, you can use music to share ideas, or in my opinion, the most important uses of music are like cultural, where you can actually start to change people's minds and hearts through messages in music. And we saw this massively in the 60s in the US, back when music was, in my opinion, a little bit more, hate to say this, but culturally important. Like, just a song could mean a lot more, it seems like, back then, just because of the way media was proliferated. Like, the internet didn't exist yet. You know, radio was way bigger than it is now. The power that music can have to spread an idea, or to start a fire of an idea in the greater society, in a society, I think is really its biggest and most important role in our lives. And that's something that, while I haven't really pursued that outside of maybe a superficial, like, write a protest song about something, you know, I've never really attempted to start like an artistic messaging movement, which is something that I want to do someday. You know, I really do. I want to someday get all this work I put into music and take it and do something with it that doesn't really benefit me, but that has the potential to change people's hearts and minds. So that's for me, those are like the three big things: is just the purely intellectual pursuit, the purely emotional pursuit, and then society, and how can music impact society. Yeah.
Well, and to be honest, that's the first two are largely why I got into music, rather than taking a more psychological route after I got that degree. You know, I ended up doing my yoga teacher training, and I see that yoga and music are so intrinsically linked, of just literally trying to sync up the mind and body in the moment. That's all that music really is to me, is using actually an external stimulus to be able to do that, whereas yoga is just using your body and breath.
Yeah.
This is using an instrument to do that. But once you, like you said, just get completely lost in the song, there's something, it maybe sounds a little bit cheesy, but it's transcendent. It does, yeah.
It's not cheesy. I think it is. I think it very much is. And authors write about this, that state of flow that often gets referenced in a lot of new books about psychology. I think music is an absolutely beautiful way to get to that point, you know, where it's almost like it's like passive experience of flow.
Yes, it just kind of comes out.
Yeah.
Did you continue on with your education after Cornish?
Not formally. After I got out of Cornish, I told myself that if a year went by where either my income as a musician went down or I felt like my opportunities weren't improving, if I wasn't becoming more of a professional, furthering my career, then the first thing I would do is go back to school. And I'm happy to say that after 12 years graduated, that hasn't happened. I would love to go back to school someday if I have time, if it makes sense with my career. But I found that once you get that fundamental music education, once you spend that time in college and you learn how to learn, and you get a little bit more of a sense of what you don't know. For me, I found it not particularly challenging to go out and buy a book on music, and if I really want to learn a new skill, learn the skill.
I studied and got a BA in psychology from Pitzer College, and I took pretty much just as many classes in music and theory and ethnomusicology, but I decided not to major in it because then I had to take very specific classes to get that degree. And I wanted to take the classes that I wanted to take. And, I've studied with private instructors, and I've studied in group classes, and I've been playing lots of instruments since I was 4. But for the large part at this point, I have learned how to learn. And so I can use different programs and books and whatnot to teach myself and really essentially tailor my education to exactly what I want, rather than what the school wants me to be learning.
Absolutely. And particularly once you get to that point where you kind of have gotten the overview, you've spent a couple years learning from a teacher, from books, and then you're like, oh, okay, I see what I don't know. Right?
Yeah.
You know what it is you need to learn.
Yeah.
And that's the other beautiful thing about music is I'm fully aware that I will never in my life get to the point that I know is possible, right? For some people, or even for myself, if I could devote 10 hours a day to it for the rest of my life. There's always a point of knowing that there's something you don't know or you can't play, and you'll probably never be able to play it. And that's kind of exciting to me. Like, you can always get better.
Yes.
Always. No matter in every way, you can always get better. So that's cool.
What artists do you suggest aspiring bass guitarists listen to?
Number one thing would just be listen very closely to the bass player in your favorite band. That is a really good piece of advice that I think is really important. On top of that, there's the people. There's the people that everybody listens to. Victor Wooten, kind of the number one person. Marcus Miller, also kind of the number one person. More recent additions to this list would be Mohini Day. She's 22, she's from India, and she's one of the best bass players in the world. Check her out. Mohini Day is amazing. Also, Hadrian Farud is one of my favorite bass players. He lives down in LA. Damien Erskine, who lives in Portland. And then, type in, what's it called? Like Bass Player Magazine in Google, and they'll give you all the list of all the stuff. But Victor Wooten, Marcus Miller, and Mohini Day are really the three on the top of my list right now.
I actually had the philosophy, who does the collective conscious say is the best drummer? Who do I think is the best drummer? And who has the most fundamentals down? Because a lot of times the people who people think are the best, they're doing ridiculously difficult things. And so you need to kind of take a step back from that. But essentially just playing to those styles of music is really how I learned how to play drums. And that was what kept me motivated, because I was able to do what I wanted to be doing and figuring it out, with the help of a teacher every once in a while, but really just able to explore the kit.
And it's amazing, you'll find as you take the lessons and you learn the fundamentals, you get better at playing the pop songs. Wow, imagine that. But it happens pretty
Yes.
quickly. So
Yeah.
yeah.